Now, while police continue to investigate the murder of Cape Town's anti-gang unit boss, Lieutenant Colonel KINNEAR, a 49-page affidavit before the court describes irregularities at the Central Firearm Registry, including details of a firearm application by alleged underworld boss Navis Modak, who's believed to have already had 9 firearms confiscated by KINNEAR. The Sunday Times has reported that KINNEAR was on the brink of solving a massive guns to gangs syndicate case at the police Central Firearms Registry. Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime Director, that's Mark Shaw, who's been investigating firearm corruption in the criminal underworld, says corruption at the Firearms Registry has resulted in guns landing in the hands of criminals. Now, Shaw has also written a book titled HITMEN for Hire, Exposing South Africa's Underworld. He joins us now live from Geneva. Mark, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. You have in some respects and perhaps quite extensively sort of explored this world where there's contract for killings and how they've become commonplace. To what extent do you think KINNEAR's murder has the markings of that world?
And I think it's almost certain that he was assassinated. Of course, you can't, for reasons related to the work that he was doing. And what we have been doing, of course, as I think you're aware, we have been counting hits in South Africa and elsewhere in the South African case since 2000. And so this development of a kind of hit economy where payment is made to kill people for economic or social or other reasons. What's so important about this case is that it intersects, firstly, a direct attack on the criminal justice system, on a prominent police officer doing very important work, and the intersection between the work that he was doing, covering this overlay, if you like, between the police or corrupt police officers and organized crime. So this is a defining moment, I think, in the history of hits since we have recorded them, and it's crucial that the case is solved, not only arresting the hitmen that are involved, but also people who may have ordered the hit.
Yeah, that's right. And perhaps, Mark, I should take a step back. Help us understand, just through broad strokes, what Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime actually is, and, I guess the interest you have in something like this taking place in South Africa.
Thanks, Jan. We were formed in around 2013, and while I'm South African, this is a global organization. It has some 70 staff and several offices around the world. And it was formed by an initial set of people, mainly law enforcement officers, in fact, who were convinced that we didn't have a good enough grasp on the nature of organized crime. We needed a better analytical means to understand it around the world, and that many of the solutions that we were trying were not working, either because of corruption, because of political involvement, and a range of other issues. So we essentially do 3 things, and you can look on the website, and most of the reports are public. The analysis of organized crime, in the case of South Africa, a range of work around different criminal markets, including assassinations. Secondly, we bring people together, different sectors of the economy, journalists, development actors and others, along with law enforcement people, to look at responses. And thirdly, we support a range of civil society organizations through a grants facility, including in South Africa, to build resilience at community level to the impact and power of organized crime. And if I can just finish all of that by saying, organized crime, illicit markets have become a huge problem in many countries around the world, Central America, the Balkans, parts of Asia, in many places in Africa. And so really it's an area that needs greater policy concern. And the hit against Lieutenant Colonel KINNEAR really brings or crystallizes many of those problems together. He was investigating a particular illicit market. He was targeted. That assassination is meant to send a signal to others in working in the area that organized crime is powerful and untouchable. So that's the kind of work we do as an organization.
Right. And I guess in that backdrop, then you'll help us connect the dots, right? KINNEAR was also said to be close to cracking what's been called a guns to gang syndicate, right? And it also involved police in the Central Firearms Registry. Help us understand how that particularly put his life in danger.
he was, of course, conducting a number of investigations, but this in particular was looking at corruption, which has been a long-standing issue in the Central Firearms Registry, and how licenses are granted, essentially. The issue has always been that people pay people who shouldn't be able to get licenses, either because they've got a criminal record or they don't qualify, they don't have the right requirements for owning a firearm or a semi-automatic rifle, for example. And corruption within the firearms registry allows people to access those guns and to own them. Now, in our own work, we have spoken to and seen clearly people within the criminal underworld, for example, who have licensed firearms and shouldn't have access to that. So I think there's really a longer-term channel or challenge around the issuing of licenses from the registry that is of enormous concern and has been for a while, and is something that is going to need to be probed and cleaned up, whatever the outcome of the KINNEAR murder is. The Sunday Times story was referring to an affidavit, as you mentioned, in February 2019, where KINNEAR laid out some of these problems in response to a court case that was underway. And the affidavit provides a very detailed breakdown of some of the problems within the firearms registry.
Given that, then, Mark, to what extent does his killing, given what he was working on, put South Africa at risk of being really susceptible to some of the adverse effects of organized crime in the world? Or perhaps do you think it's a little too late to ask that question now?
To some degree, it's too late. Organized crime has grown enormously over the last 2 decades in South Africa. It takes on a particular, it's a very complex beast, if you like, in the South African context. There's multiple criminal markets. However, there are in South Africa, I would say, a number of key criminal figures, a network of figures, many of whom know each other. They are in competition, but they are also in contact with each other. There's some complex criminal formations around gangs in the Western Cape, for example, around illicit mining, around diamonds, around the taxi industry. And so it's a very complex phenomena. In many of the criminal markets, it is clear that corruption within the police facilitates criminal activity, as in this case. And I think this is the area that should be of enormous concern. Where we are working elsewhere, that also applies. And really the erosion of policing through corruption is the hardest challenge to face when you are dealing with organized crime, because you often don't know who you are dealing with in the police and elsewhere. And I think officers like KINNEAR personally face that. There's this the rumor mill of who's connected, who's not, who's corrupt, who's not, and the very great difficulties of working in that environment, not sharing information with some people, sharing information with others, building relationships of trust. And what it does is it erodes the institution, fundamentally, the institution of law enforcement, of prosecution, etc. And that makes it extremely difficult to tackle organized crime. Solving this murder, I think, is crucial. It's a kind of turning point, in my view, as a South African myself, around the response to organized crime. What it shows, or what is shown elsewhere, when senior police officers, for example, are murdered, for example, in Italy, Mexico, Central America, is the response of the state is crucial. The state has to show that it can respond effectively in these cases. Otherwise, there's a creeping process of assassinations. Other prosecutors are targeted, other police are targeted. It sends a message to the criminal justice system that organized crime should not and cannot be touched. And people who are corrupt within the system then become empowered. Yeah. So I cannot emphasize enough how important this case is. There's a clear overlay, at least in my view, between the underworld and elements of corrupt policing in respect of this case. And it's urgent that the state gets to the bottom of it. And we'll have to see in the coming weeks how successful they are. Whether just arresting the hitmen is enough I don't think so. We really need to reach into the underworld and understand who is behind, which figures are behind this particular killing.
Yeah, and as we chart that way forward, so to speak, Mark, I mean, do you imagine a context where we're able to sufficiently address organized crime in a country like South Africa without winning the fight globally, so to speak?
I think so. I think a couple of things are absolutely essential. The first is to have a high-level investigative body which is free of political influence and free of corruption. Without that, it's extremely difficult to do high-level investigations and prosecutions. So I think that has to be the first objective. The second has to be building civil society and the role of the media. And I'm in civil society, and we are talking here on a media platform. The importance of keeping these issues alive and reminding government and the state of the importance of acting, of not providing a platform and a voice to criminal figures, which often occurs, and providing a voice to civil society figures who act to build resilience within communities, I think is absolutely essential over time. And third is to, I think, bolster and support police officers within the system at large who are not corrupt, who are attempting to respond and build the institutions against, if you like, the cancer of organized crime. Taken together, those three things have been shown elsewhere to make an important difference. Of course, it does not eradicate illicit markets themselves, and there's much we can say about drugs markets, for example, and the range of policy responses we can make there. But those three responses as a society, independent policing, independent and free media, protecting those who respond and speak out against organized crime, are crucial elements in a national response to the phenomena.
Absolutely, Mark. There's so many other different facets to explore here, but sadly we're going to have to leave it there because of time. Certainly appreciate your coming onto the AM report. Thanks very much indeed for your insights. Mark Shaw is with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. In fact, he's the director of that civil society organization, certainly giving us a lot of food for thought. Live to us there from Geneva.